Everyone talks about menopause, but menopause is the finish line. Perimenopause is the marathon, and it can take a decade. A decade is not unheard of for perimenopause. And so, I feel like growing up, everyone was talking about menopause, but menopause is the end of this much longer process. And so, if you're not in perimenopause yet, if you're approaching perimenopause, just FYI, it can take a long time to get to the very end and to hit the point where it's no longer something you're thinking about. On this episode of the Harness the Power of Planning podcast, I'm going to talk about my recent lab test that told me I have high cholesterol that I need to start thinking about and what I'm going to do about it. And then I talk about creating a game plan for the holiday season so that you can have as much joy and magic as you are creating for those around you, because you deserve it, on the podcast starting now. Hi, Alegre here, and it is just me today because Natasha is being a mom, and sometimes being a mom means that other things have to fall by the wayside. So hopefully we'll have her back next week. And this week's topic is coming up with a game plan for the holidays. Halloween is right around the corner. Probably there's been talk in your family about costumes and dressing up and trick-or-treating, and maybe for some of you are putting up ofrendas for Dia de los Muertos, which is right after Halloween. And so it's the beginning of the holiday season, all the different things that are happening at this time of year, no matter what it is that you are celebrating. And so as a parent, it can often feel like there are so many responsibilities that you have as the person who is making the magic for the holiday season. Sometimes it can feel like you don't actually get to experience the holidays, the magic of the holidays yourself, because you're so busy making them magical for other people. So that's what I'm going to talk about in a little bit, coming up with a game plan. And if you don't know, we actually wrote a book called Rock Your Holidays. And that's basically what I'm going to be talking about today, is the Rock Your Holiday game plan. And my books got pushed back. Here they are. Here's our bouquet of workbooks. So every book is a workbook, and it takes about 45 minutes to an hour to read it. And so Rock Your Holidays is the one, 3 simple steps to having fun while getting things done. So this is all about coming up with a holiday game plan. So I'm going to talk about the basics of it in just a moment. But before I talk about that, we always do some chit chat. And I definitely had some thoughts about things that I wanted to talk about today. And so even though it's just me and there's not 2 people doing the chit chat, I wanted to talk about it. And feel free to chime in wherever you are watching this. If you comment in the comment section, I will see it. Hello, Deepesh. And I am happy to comment and answer any questions that you may have. And also, this is a conversation. I would love to hear your thoughts on this. And so I guess something that I've been thinking about a lot lately is, my health and my, I recently got a checkup, and I got my blood drawn, and I have, for the first time in my life, high cholesterol. Anyone else have high cholesterol out there? Let me know. Let me know if you have high cholesterol. And for those of you who watched before, I am 50 years old, so I'm deep into perimenopause, and menopause is right around the corner. In fact, I would say I am in year 9 of perimenopause. Of course, it's hard to know exactly where you are in menopause, but that's my guess. And so if you are someone who is going through or entering perimenopause, you might not know that it is very natural once you hit perimenopause and menopause for your cholesterol to spike. Okay. And I'm going to explain why, because this is something I did not know until I hit this age. So for women, we actually use cholesterol. Our body uses cholesterol to make the hormones that we need. And so your body is no longer using cholesterol. So guess what happens? Your cholesterol spikes. So I went from having very, very low cholesterol to suddenly now I have high cholesterol because I'm in the stage of life where my body is not using up the cholesterol to make the hormones. I don't know if that's news to you. That was news to me. And so I had learned this just like when I was entering, as I said, I think I'm in year 9 of perimenopause, and for those of you who are not in it, you might be wondering, "Well, how do you know you're in year 9?" Because after many, many years of decades after decades, decades, I can't believe I can say that, after, let's see, 13, right? After 3 and a half decades of being very regular with my period, I went from 12 to 11 to 10 to 9. Literally, I just lost 1 period every year for about 6 years. And then about 3 years ago, I started having other symptoms. So that means waking up in the middle of the night, usually around 2 in the morning, wide awake, could not go back to sleep. The other thing was I had always been the one in our relationship that was cold. I don't know if you're there, but I'm like, "I need a blanket, I need a sweater, it's cold." And I suddenly became the person who was hot, who was warm. Like, "Is it just me or is it warm in here?" And so those were the main 2 symptoms that I was having, was feeling warm. I wouldn't call it a hot flash, I never got sweaty, and I was never uncomfortable. I was just, "How come you're wearing sweaters and I feel like I need a t-shirt?" And then the waking up in the middle of the night. So those were my big 2 symptoms that came on about 3 years ago, and I have been able to completely manage my symptoms with herbs. I started going to an acupuncturist. She gave me some herbs. Also, I did a bunch of reading. I took some herbs. And actually, if I'm going to put up in the QR code, if you are interested in oh, let me see where I can put that. Okay, I have to find it first. But I actually have consolidated all the herbs that I take in a list on Amazon so that you can see it completely there. So let me just put this up. And so anyway, so I've been able to completely manage my symptoms with all these different kinds of herbs. And so the interesting thing about perimenopause, and I don't know if you all feel this, but for me, the interesting thing about perimenopause is that you everyone talks about menopause, and menopause is when you haven't had your period for 12 years, okay? Everyone talks about menopause, but menopause is the finish line. Perimenopause is the marathon, and it can take a decade. A decade is not unheard of for perimenopause. And so, I feel like growing up, everyone was talking about menopause, but menopause is the end of this much longer process. And so if you're not in perimenopause yet, if you're approaching perimenopause, just FYI, it can take a long time to get to the very end and to hit the point where it's no longer something you're thinking about. So, all of that is to say that now cholesterol is an issue for me. It's never been a cholesterol for me. And by the way, tinyurl.com, my Amazon picks, all one word, PICKS, my Amazon picks. That's where you can get all the herbs that I use. And by the way, for those of you who are watching live, if you for some reason have to step away, I do upload these live chats as the Harness the Power of Planning podcast. So you can listen wherever you get your podcasts. This will be episode 75 when I put it up. So the Harness the Power of Planning podcast, that is somewhere you can go to listen to this. So I suddenly went from having super low cholesterol to super high cholesterol, not unexpected. However, it's kind of been creeping up, and this year I have officially entered the it is too high area, and I feel like I'm totally having to relearn my body because of this change. And so I've actually been reading a book for the last 6 months. It's called How Not to Die. and the author's name is, let me look it up, Dr. Michael Greger, and it is a lot of information, let me tell you. And by the way, by How Not to Die, he's not trying to say you're gonna live forever. It's each chapter is like how not to die from cancer, how not to die from high blood pressure, how not to die from medical errors. That was actually one of the chapters. It was very interesting. So it's all these topics. And he had actually been talking about cholesterol, and so serendipitously, he mentioned that some of the things that help to lower cholesterol are eating beans and legumes. And I was vegetarian for a long time, and I actually didn't really call myself vegetarian. I called myself a flexitarian because I would eat turkey at Thanksgiving, or if I, went to someone's house, I would eat whatever they made. And I was vegetarian for a long time until, I was vegetarian up until the 3rd trimester of my pregnancy. And I used to eat tons of beans and legumes. And so I have actually been thinking for the last couple of years about going back to eating more plant-based. And this book, How Not to Die, is very much a proponent of plant-based whole food diet. This doctor actually says that he doesn't like the terms vegetarian and vegan because he feels like the focus then is on what you don't eat rather than what you do eat. And fair enough. I feel like, whole foods, plant-based is a fair way to describe how I used to eat and how I've been thinking I need to start eating again. And so I actually started eating more whole foods plant-based about 2 weeks ago. And so we'll see how it goes. I'll be checking in, regularly on this live chat and on the podcast with how I'm feeling. It's funny because it's been, almost 15 years since I was last, vegetarian, last whole foods plant-based. So it's been a while. I feel like I'm having to remember how I ate. And one of the big epiphanies, for those of you out there who maybe are whole foods plant-based, I would love any guidance that you have. I'm sure we could all benefit from it. But one of the epiphanies I remember having when I was switching to being whole foods plant-based, 20 some odd years ago, I remember the epiphany I had was I need to think about my main dish might be something that I used to think about as a side dish, because that was the hardest thing for me to wrap my head around is, well, what's going to be my main dish? We're so used to entrees being meat or animal based that wrapping your head around, okay, well, how do I cook food without that entree is a different way of thinking. And so I remember having this epiphany 20 some odd years ago where I said, a side dish can be a main dish. There's no reason it can't be. It's funny, these little rules and barriers we think of that we come up with that we don't even realize we come up with. Like, I didn't even know I had this sort of cultural barrier about, like, well, an entree must be animal based, but clearly I had it because I was having the hardest time saying, well, what are we going to eat for dinner? Breakfast and lunch weren't such a big deal because breakfast is often a smoothie. Sometimes it's a parfait. Sometimes it's, an apple with peanut butter. So that was not hard. And lunch is has been a kale salad for most of the last 3 decades. So that hasn't been hard, although I have added a lot of chicken and eggs over the years. So now I'm just going back to just having the salad and adding some beans or legumes because, as Dr. Michael Greger said, these will help with my cholesterol. So I'm very interested to see where my cholesterol is in a year from now because I'm making this change and I'm going to be adding in more foods that can help with cholesterol now that it's an issue. Perimenopause. And I look forward to checking back with you in a year. I'm actually going to try and see if I can get my blood tested sooner than a year because I like to know if these changes are helping or if I need to be more aggressive. However, my husband has also, his cholesterol has also been inching up. And so we're making this change together, which is a lot easier. The challenge is that my child has never eaten quote unquote whole foods plant based, and so it's a shift for her eating more. She's grown up with beans and legumes, but perhaps not the quantity that we are now going to be eating. So we'll see how this goes, and I will check in with you. And if you have any tips, if you want to respond even after this is no longer live, we see the questions and we'd be happy to respond. And we'd love to learn from you all. So that's what's going on. That's what I'm thinking about cholesterol and how to lower it through diet and exercise too to some point. But I feel like I get in a lot. I get in a lot of good movement. So I feel like for me, diet is definitely going to play the bigger role in this. So, moving on to our topic, coming up with a game plan for the holidays. So, you know, at Beyond Your Wildest Dreams, we say that planning makes everything better. So often we go into life reacting to what's happening to us. And the challenge with when you're just in reaction mode is that it forces you to focus on things that are urgent but might not be important. Okay, so let me just explain a little bit. We all have things that we want to do that we say that are important, whether it is eating well or exercise or spending time with friends or family or working on that business that you've been thinking about or that book that you've been wanting to write. These are things that are important to you, that affect your quality of life, that are aligned with your values in terms of the kind of life you want to live. However, things are always coming at us. People are asking us for their help, whether it's, the PTA or local neighborhood government and politics, writing letters. I'm on many organizations, so I see all the asks. Maybe you're part of a nonprofit, they have asks. Then there are all the asks that are related professionally. This week, so if you haven't listened to us before, besides BYWD, Natasha and I each have our own separate businesses, and I write speeches and I coach individuals on delivering these speeches. And so this week I had a client who at the last minute needed many more hours from me than they usually use. And this is my business, right? So this person is a good client. So I wanted to accommodate them, but it pushed other things aside. Now, that was the things they pushed aside weren't anything that was more important, if you will. However, we all get these last minute requests. Other people, perhaps they didn't plan appropriately, and now their lack of planning is becoming your emergency. So we've all experienced that push pull of what is urgent, and urgent, by urgent I mean time sensitive, and what is important. And by important, I mean things that are actually going to move the needle in terms of your quality of life. So the holidays are something that come up every year. And, here at BYWD, we want to help you use planning to live the life you want to live. And we really believe that you can have that with planning. And there are some points in our year that repeat themselves over and over again. And especially if you are a mom or a dad, you are going to have to keep your eye on the holiday season, uh, summertime, and then the beginning of the school year, right? Like these are things where you kind of need a game plan to keep your eye on the prize, right? It's like, how do I want my holidays to be? How do I want my summer to be? And how do I want my kid to start their school year? So those are the three touch points. A fourth touch point is the beginning of the year, because Okay, the holidays are over, and you might be thinking to yourself, "Oh my goodness, what do I wanna accomplish for myself this year?" "Oh my gosh, Simona, hello. It's so funny. I just saw some people that we know in common." Okay, sorry, just responding to someone who I know is watching. Yes, just saw a bunch of friends from school. Anyway, and we talked about you. We thought about you. Okay, so, uh, going back to these touch points. So, the new year is when we really wanna help people take advantage of what's called the fresh start effect, right? People get excited about new beginnings and new opportunities. So the new year, the beginning of the month, your birthday, maybe starting a new job or moving to a new place. These are all exciting because of this scientifically documented phenomenon called the fresh start effect. So we like to help people around the fresh start effect. And then we also like to help those of us with kiddos around summer and back to school and the holidays. And so we wrote this book called Rock Your Holidays. And it's all about coming up with a plan. And by the way, all of our books are workbooks. So we're not just talking to you about theory, we give you space to practice the thing that we mention. So the first step that we say for Rock Your Holidays is to take a moment and think about how you want this season to be. We call it the reason for the season. Take a moment. What's a word or phrase that captures your reason for the season? Feel free to write that down. Like if you have a pen and pencil in front of you, maybe something immediately comes to mind. Maybe you think, I want it to be peaceful. I want it to be calm. Maybe you think, I want to see my friends and family. That's the most important thing. Maybe you think, I wanna be as social as possible. I wanna go to every possible thing I can go to. So, just take a moment and think about what you want your season to look like, and it can really be, anything. You could say, "I wanna plan absolutely nothing this season and just be spontaneous." Okay, great. You know what your plan is. Go forth. Maybe you think, "I want my holidays to be relaxing." For me personally, I kind of have a list of things that I like to do during the holidays, but I don't need to hit every single one of them every single holiday season. Like, for instance, I do enjoy seeing a production of the Nutcracker, but done that so many times that I'm not going to do it this year. And that makes space for doing something else new. Oh my goodness, I just looked in the picture and I guess I forgot to put on my other earring. How funny is that? I'm just gonna put on my other earring right now. Ah, real life and live video. So, whatever you decide, think about how you want your season to be because that just really allows you to establish healthy boundaries. So much of being able to focus on what's important and not what's urgent is by having boundaries. But you can't have a boundary without first deciding, oh, this is how I want it to be, because that decision is what creates the boundary for you. For instance, if you say, I would like to go to one large party this year, and that's it, because that's all I feel like I have the bandwidth for this year. Or maybe you're not super social and you just say, one big party will fill my socialness meter and I'm good. Then that's your boundary. And if you get 3 invitations, you've already decided. It's much easier to set the boundary beforehand because if you get those 3, you might think, "Oh, well, I could do them all." And then you feel like you missed out on either some quiet time or so alone time, or maybe you're tired, maybe being that social is draining for you. So, set the boundary beforehand rather than when the invitations start coming in, because that's when you're reacting rather than being proactive. Okay, so it is October 10th today. This is a perfect time to think about your holidays. Think to yourself, what do you want this holiday season to be? Okay? Then once you have the holiday season, I want you to do a brain dump. I want you to write down all the things that are going to be happening between now and whatever you consider the holiday season. If you celebrate Dia de los Reyes, go ahead and go through January 6th. If you celebrate Nowruz, go ahead and go through to spring. It's up to you what you consider the holiday season. Okay. I am pretty much a Halloween to New Year's person. My family doesn't celebrate Dia de los Reyes. If you don't know my background, my mother is actually my parents are both American, but my mother is of Chinese ethnicity. So we don't celebrate Dia de los Reyes. It was not actually, I don't think my father celebrated it either. So there you go. So we kind of stop with the new year. So go ahead and write down all the holidays that you want to consider part of this holiday season, whatever that may be, and all of the things that you might want to do. So on my list is the Nutcracker, even though I'm not going to do it this year. Okay. And then once you have that brain dump, and you can see my brain dump, it's pretty long. That's my brain dump for October to January. Okay. And it includes things that you might not consider holiday-y, but tend to happen during this time of year. Like, for instance, I like to do a ski trip in January. So I consider that kind of part of the holiday season. I also I do celebrate Lunar New Year. So depending on what time of the year it is, sometimes that can be on the earlyish side, and so I kind of include that in my planning. I also include a local parade that I love to attend during this time of the year. So really everything's in here. And let's see, it includes things like, for instance, this is not an event, but it is one of the things that you might have to do if you wanna send out holiday cards. You might wanna do a holiday card photo shoot. Also, you need to order these holiday cards. So, for instance, sending out holiday cards, if that's something that you like to do, you should put that on here as well. It's not an event, but it is something that happens. Other things could be work parties, decorating. I like to do a Thanksgiving Day hike, so that's on here. So all of these things that you like to do, just complete brain dump. Don't think, just right. And it's interesting because I have been doing holiday cards frequently for the many years, and for some reason, I'm not sure I'm going to do holiday cards this year. It's just not feeling like something that is super important to me. So even though you have this list, things can change, and that's totally okay, because guess what? This is your holiday season, no one else's. Do what you want to do. Obviously, there are other people who have a say in this, your immediate family, your extended family. So there might be some negotiation there. I get it. I get the negotiation, but just start thinking about what you want to do. And if there's, something that you don't want to do, see if your family, see how your family feels about it. Maybe you're all on the same page. Okay. So the next step is to prioritize the brain dump that you just did. And what that means is going down and taking the brain dump and just writing the numbers 1, 2, or 3 next to it. And 1 is, I would never miss this event. 2 is, I'd love to make this happen. And 3 is fun, but if we skip it, it's no big deal. And again, these numbers are going to change from year to year. But for this year, go ahead and rate them 1, 2, and 3. Okay. And then the final step is to then start calendaring the things that you have to do. And by the way, there is one bonus tip in here, but it's a little difficult to explain without looking at this book. So for that bonus step, you're going to have to get the ebook or the physical book. But the final step is to start calendaring the things, starting with the number ones, right? So that's the beauty of prioritizing things, is you've decided what's important to you, you've ranked them, and now you're going to start putting them in. So start popping the number ones into your calendar. And start with October, pop those into your calendar. And if you look at your October and you think, "Wow, this is a lot of things." feel free to do away with one. That's the beauty of planning in advance, is that you get to think to yourself, what's the right mix of things to do? And you get to say, you know what? That's just enough, or that's too much, or actually I have more capacity. I could do a little bit more. When you don't think, when you just react to people's invitations, that's what leads to burnout, because you're not looking at the big picture. So this allows you to look at the macro picture and say to yourself, yes, I have enough energy for this, or no, I don't have enough energy for this. Okay, so go through and put in all your number ones. And if it looks like that's full enough, then don't add anything else. If it looks like you have more capacity, then go on to your twos and threes. And that is how you come up with a holiday game plan so that you can be proactive rather than reactive. Now, I will add one little bonus tip is feel free to adjust your plan as you go. We're starting on October 10th. This is kind of a high scale, a macro view plan for the whole season. You can decide in November, you know what? I feel like doing more, or I feel like doing less. That's fine. Tweak as much as you want to tweak. This is your plan. It's here to serve you. But having a plan to begin with is going to save you so much time and energy, because you'll have already gone through the thought process of, what do I actually want my holidays to look like? And then you can make decisions based on that. And you can decide yes or no to that party or event, because it does or doesn't support your vision for the holidays. Thank you so much for joining me this week. Hopefully Natasha will be back next week. You know how it is when you're a mom. You have to prioritize your family. But it's been a pleasure to have you with me. And if you want to get the ebook or the $7.99 price that you see popped up on the screen here, that is for the paperback. But the ebook, I believe, is $3.99. Sometimes there's specials that we're not told about that get run. But that's my understanding. And then again, if you want to go to tinyroyal.com/myamazonpicks, you can see I have a whole list there of the supplements that I've been taking and the other tools that I've been using to help me through this period of perimenopause. Thank you so much for joining. I'll see you next week. Dream wild, wild dreamer. Thanks for joining us for the Harness the Power of Planning podcast. Be sure to like and subscribe wherever you listen.